The wind that night in the Appalachian Mountains carried more than just the sound of rustling leaves. It carried whispers, long, stretched, and almost human, but not quite. Locals said that the mountains could speak if you listened long enough, that the wind itself was the voice of something old, something that had been there before people had names for it. But when Emily Carter moved into her late grandmother's cabin deep in those mountains, she didn't believe in old wives' tales. She believed in silence, in solitude, and in starting over. Emily had lost her husband in a car accident 6 months earlier. The cabin, isolated at the base of Thunder Ridge, offered her an escape. She wanted the quiet, the distance from the pitying eyes of neighbors and the constant hum of city life. Her grandmother's cabin sat on the edge of an old trail long abandoned. Locals called it the Night Walker's Path. It cut through a dense patch of oak and pine, disappearing into misty hills that looked like they could hide anything. The first few days were peaceful. Emily spent her time cleaning the cabin, chopping wood, and walking the trail during daylight. The air was cool, crisp, and filled with the earthy scent of moss and pine needles. But after sunset, the forest changed. The trees stopped moving. The insects went quiet. And then came the footsteps. At first, she thought it was a deer. She'd hear crunching leaves around the cabin at night, slow and deliberate. But when she looked through the window, flashlight in hand, nothing was ever there. On the third night, she found prints in the soft dirt outside her window. They were barefoot, long, narrow prints, as though made by someone with too many toes. She told herself it was her imagination. The mountains played tricks on people, especially those who stayed alone too long. The next morning, she visited the small town of Boone Hollow, about 10 miles away, to get supplies. When she mentioned the prints to the old shopkeeper, his face went pale. "You're up Thunder Ridge, right?" he asked, his voice hushed. "Yes," she replied, "at the old Carter place." He leaned across the counter. "You stay inside at night, miss. Don't walk past the tree line after sundown." "They walk then?" She asked, forcing a nervous laugh. "The night walkers," he said, looking toward the window as if afraid something might be listening. "Old spirits, or maybe not spirits at all. Some say they were miners who got lost in the hills 100 years ago. Some say they never died. But they come for the living who wander after dark." Emily dismissed it as superstition, though the man's trembling hands stayed with her all the way back home. That night, she locked every door and window, lit the fireplace, and tried to read. Around midnight, the wind began to howl. Then, under the sound of the crackling fire, came the soft thump of footsteps on the porch. Slow, heavy, pacing. She froze. Then came the scratching, light, deliberate, along the wooden walls. Her heart hammered. She grabbed the flashlight and crept toward the window, her breath fogging the glass. When she shone the beam outside, she saw nothing. Only the trees swaying like shadows under a pale, cloud-covered moon. The next morning, she found long scratches along the cabin wall, thin but deep. She tried to convince herself it was an animal. Maybe a bear, maybe raccoons. But deep down, she knew these were made with intent. That evening, she decided to record the sounds. She left her phone recording by the window before going to bed. When she listened to it in the morning, the first half was filled with crickets and wind. But around 2:14 a.m., there was a low, rhythmic humming. It wasn't wind. It was a voice, deep and melodic, almost chanting. Then came the sound of feet, many of them, shuffling through the leaves. And faintly, a whisper near the microphone. "Emily." Her blood went cold. She hadn't told anyone where she was staying. That day, she hiked up the ridge in search of any sign of trespassers. The trail narrowed between boulders and twisted trees, the forest floor covered in thick moss. About a mile up, she found something strange, an old wooden marker, almost eaten away by time, carved with symbols she couldn't recognize. Behind it was a shallow pit lined with stones, blackened as if something had been burned there recently. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat by the fire with her hunting knife in hand, listening. Around 3 a.m., her lantern flickered. The air in the cabin grew cold, unnaturally cold. Then came the footsteps again, closer than before. She could hear breathing. Slow, ragged. She turned toward the window, and for the briefest second, saw a face, gray, featureless, its mouth hanging open too wide, eyes hollow like pits of darkness. The scream that tore from her throat seemed to shake the walls. She dropped the lantern, the glass shattering. Flames licked the rug, and she rushed to stamp it out. When she looked back at the window, the face was gone. But in the ashes by the fireplace, something glowed faintly, tiny, white, like a sliver of bone. The next morning, she packed her bags. She couldn't stay another night. But when she went outside, the trail had changed. The woods seemed different, denser. She couldn't find the path she came up on. Every turn led her back to the cabin. It was as if the forest itself had shifted overnight. Panicked, she ran until she saw movement ahead, figures standing between the trees. At first, she thought they were people, maybe hikers. But as she got closer, she saw their skin was ashen, their clothes tattered and wet with dirt. Their eyes, those hollow, empty eyes, watched her without blinking. One of them stepped forward. Its head tilted unnaturally as it spoke in a broken, rasping voice. "You shouldn't have listened." Emily stumbled backward, tripping over roots. When she looked up, they were gone. But the whispering began again, this time coming from all around her. The trees themselves seemed to breathe. She ran until she reached the cabin again, gasping, crying. She locked herself inside and didn't move until the sun rose. That day, she wrote everything down in her journal. Every sound, every whisper, every detail of what she'd seen. She planned to leave the next morning. She didn't care how. But that night, just as she drifted into a restless sleep, the whisper came again, right by her ear. "We walk tonight." The cabin door creaked open on its own. She never made it out. Days later, a search party from Boone Hollow found her car by the main road, keys still inside. The trail up to Thunder Ridge was covered in strange footprints, barefoot, elongated, with too many toes. The cabin stood silent, the door wide open. Inside, the only sign of Emily was her journal, found near the hearth, pages filled with frantic handwriting. The last page read, "They walk when the moon hides. They hum to call you near. If you hear them, don't look. Don't answer. Just run." And at the bottom of the page, a single handprint was pressed in soot, long, skeletal, and not quite human. Locals still say that on moonless nights, if you stand near Thunder Ridge and listen closely, you can hear her voice among the whispers, calling for help. But those who go searching for her never return. They say the night walkers always find those who walk the path after dark, and once they do, you walk with them forever.